Northwest Territories. We've started to merge conversations on flooding and wildfires since they seem to be getting closer aligned in the seasons. As you may recall, in 2023 we had a wildfire event on KFN that led to an evacuation, and that was at a similar time period where we've seen past flood events. So we're choosing now to give updates on what's happening with flooding around this year so you can be prepared, as well as wildfires. So we'll run into a bit of the history of flooding and wildfires in Hay River, give you a bit of information on current conditions and some of the forecasts, and then some information on what the town's been doing for mitigation projects tied to the both areas, and just some preparedness information, including evacuation preparedness, and then we'll open it up for any questions. So, yeah, a ton of work really goes into each year on preparing for emergencies. In the cases where there might be one, there's a lot of preparation to ensure that we're ready in case those situations arise, primarily through flood risks and wildfires, but there might be other community emergencies as well. On the next slide here, it just gives an overview of some of the emergency measures organization structures throughout the Northwest Territories. So any emergency management system relies on various levels, including the private sector or the residential section. Everyone has a role in preventing and preparing and responding, and sometimes recovering from emergencies. So at that first level is the public. Those are you as individuals who are encouraged to develop household emergency plans and stay informed from communications that are issued from government organizations such as ourselves. And yeah, individuals are really wanting to make sure that they're protecting their property and their families that live with them. At the next level of support is the community level of emergency management organization. So we call that the LEMO. We've got, that's the town of Hay River coordinates, council designates authorities to this organization to act on their behalf. Within that, we have town Hay River staff, we have local indigenous governments, Hay River Health is a key partner, Department of Infrastructure, RCMP, the district education authorities, and other key businesses and organizations. So we have, as a combined organization, a responsibility for preparedness, for recovery, and response ahead of emergency events. So if we get into a situation where we require more resources than what we have in the community, we escalate that up to the regional level of EMO, which is based out of Fort Smith, and that's through MACA. And then there's a territorial emergency management organization, which can provide additional services and support if we get into a need for that. So on the next slide here, just a continued note about some of the emergency planning activities that we have been undertaking this year already. We do meet weekly as an organization. We provide updates and look at some of the risks that might be emerging, tied to, say, breakup and flooding and wildfires. We all have different roles, so we make sure that everyone's trained and ready and understands what they would do in an emergency. We have an emergency plan that we update each year. It's in really good shape from prior years, of updates done in prior years. Just minor updates were completed this year. It's a pretty thorough document. It can be found on our website on hayriver.com. Communication plan exists, so we sit down and we talk about how do we want to communicate, what do we want to communicate, and through what channels, such as this public meeting. I'll note as well that we work with a lot of different organizations, such as environment and climate change, and they have hydrologists and specialists who provide information and expertise that we might not have installed internally. So Travis does a lot of conversations with them throughout preparedness and during events. I'm going to pass it over to Travis, and he's going to give you some information on the history of flooding and some of the risks that we're dealing with.
This one on?
Yeah, perfect.
I'll just walk through the maps here. So we do have new inundation maps that we finally received through ECC. As an update to the flood maps, but this is to show sort of the historical worst case floodplain maps. So as you can see here, this is a reflection of Old Town. And you can see as far as the water can carry. This is also available, I believe, on the website as well. So if anyone wants to have a more thorough look, rather than just looking at this, this is a reflection of 2022. A lot of this was updated from that. So you can see how the water worked itself into 553, also into the Riverview Drive area and the ravine, and also the downtown core. And affecting several of the homes along the riverbank as well. So nice to have new risk maps for ourselves. This is further upstream. You can see the golf course there. And then this is Paradise Gardens. So this now reflects what happened in 2022 with Paradise. Our history with floods, for anyone who isn't aware, we had a major flood in 1963 on Vail Island. This is a photo of Main Street that's facing north. You can see the massive amounts of ice that was left on the street afterwards. After this flood in 1963, they decided to move the town to Newtown, which was higher ground and had been less prone to flooding. This is Paradise Gardens in 2022. So this is showing how high the water got out there. Currently, the water conditions, I'll get to that later on actually, but it's much lower than that. This is 553. You can see how it worked itself right through most of 553. There's some higher ground up on the farther end there. And this is downtown. So this water came over the riverbank and flooded all the way up into Northern and Marina parking lot there. This is Old Town. This shows where the ice came across into Old Town. You can see this is the Fisherman's Wharf here. This is the road, the first rail crossing over by MTS there. So this road gets impacted by water and ice. Current conditions, I'll speak to what's going on right now. So as you can see, the graph on the left is showing what our current water conditions were this morning in the Hay River by Hay River monitoring station, which is over by Delancey. And there's a photo that I took today of the ice by the bridge. That ice hasn't shifted since this morning, so I haven't checked just now, but been looking at it all day and it's been stuck there. So just some of the stuff that we grab ahead of the season, we get our snowpack information. So the snowpack within the Hay River Basin is on average about 104% of normal. In 2022, I think we saw 160% of normal, so it was quite a bit different. Ice thickness was a bit below average this year in areas like obviously the West Channel, because there wasn't a lot of water there. But it was average closer to the lake, which we expected just because it seems to be a lot colder over there, and we end up with thicker ice near the mouth. The main ice consolidation right now that we have starts at the homesteaders, and the tail is at the concourse. The water levels are at an average level for our breakup, which is at 6 meters. The historic high is around 12 meters, so that's 2022 levels, so about half of our major flood. Water levels in the south are starting to drop as close to us as the border. They've been dropping now since yesterday and continue to drop. So that's usually about anywhere from a 24-hour to a 48-hour impact for us. So we're going to start seeing water levels likely coming down in the Hay River area. The water seems to be flowing out to the lake, which is good. You know, we had a drone flying out around the west channel there and seen a lot of water building up along the shoreline, which is the indication that the water is finding its way out underneath the ice. The weather in the south, if anyone's taking a look down south, it's going to be fairly high. I think high level is going to see 24 degrees here in the next few days. So that warm weather should hopefully heat up that water south of us, and even a couple of degrees or a half a degree difference seems to make an impact on our ice. So that'll be good for us. And we also had radar scans today from ECC. We get radar scans every couple of days that come from the satellite, and that gives us an indication of potential ice further upstream. It looks like there's some ice that was making its way into us from the NWT border today, but we're not seeing any southern ice. And from the border south is quite clear. There's no ice that come from the south, and the ice that should come to town is in pockets. It's not a consistent push from the NWT border. So this is a photo of what I was talking about with the main ice consolidation. So that's the head of where the at Homesteaders, and also the tail by the golf course. So that is connected all the way through, which for us in the past, we've had stuff connected all the way upstream and quite a long ways. So it's nice to see it localized in a smaller area.
Thanks, Travis. I'm just going to spend a little time speaking to some of the mitigation projects that the town's been undertaking in recent years, or will be doing shortly. So at the top of the list there is the West Channel berm enhancement. So probably most of you are familiar with that berm that was established way back in, I think in the 90s, if I'm correct. We're upgrading it right now just to provide increased protection throughout the length of the West Channel community. So that work was funded by the federal pot of money called the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. So phase one of that project was completed last year, where Alaska Road, which is by the West Point First Nations Band Office, that was eroding. We've relocated the road, increased the elevations on it, and yeah, that work was really wrapped up last year. Phase two started late last year, and that part of that phase is increasing elevations of the berm, moving south from that Alaska Road towards the kind of the ice crossing or airport area. So this year we'll be doing more work to clean it up. It's got some erosion issues. We're making it higher, and then phase three, which we might be able to start this year, otherwise it'll be completed next year, is the expansion. So there's some slight expansions targeted for when you first come into the West Channel community by the Oxbow there, and also at the far end towards the airport, some extension into that area. Another major project that we're working on is the airport road. So that's the road that runs from the West Channel Bridge down along the West Channel and then towards the water treatment plant. So Travis showed you pictures from 2022 when we had significant flooding in that area, really a huge amount of property damage. Again, we got money from the feds. It's 100%, both of these projects are 100% funded by the federal government. And what we'll be doing is increasing the elevation, primarily in the areas between the highway and towards the ballpark, the old Don Rates ballpark there. But yeah, up to about 6 feet, I think. And then there'll be some pavement, and it'll be made non-permeable There's also some areas of the road towards the water treatment plant that will be elevated, and some backflow prevention on drainage storm systems in that area. We've been working also on lift station 1, which is the lift station in the ravine by the schools. If you know from 2022 that during the big flood it was almost completely submerged underwater. There was only a couple feet on top of it. It took a lot of damage, and that lift station is used for about 50% of the community's sewer system movement. So it's very important infrastructure. Again, we've got 100% dollars to fund repairing some of those damages that still exist, and then elevating some of the key infrastructure within it. So that'll put us in a good position for future years, for many years to come. That work is just getting started now in terms of construction. The tender has been awarded, and the target is to have it all completed this year. There's other work that we're doing, flood mapping updates. Travis showed you the maps with all the blue. The last time those maps were updated was in 1983. Another set of the maps actually are related to probability of flooding. So we speak in 100-year flood probability. Now we're starting to talk more about 200-year flood probability. So those maps will be used. Actually this summer we're doing work with our engineering consultants to say how will that be incorporated into development standards for the future. So it's an important exercise so that people can build safely and avoid these risks in the future. Other work, there's some storm flow prevention that we're doing downtown and in other areas. Several key drainage projects in West Channel into the industrial area. We're also trying to advance some land development projects, more long-term, but away from some of the water risks. So Sundog by the hospital and Aspen Heights in the 553 area. But those have seen some advancements on the design work and funding in some phases, but they're probably 20 years out for actual completion. And yeah, we'll be undertaking a full climate adaptation study this year, kicking off this year, which will help guide us on future mitigation activities, not only for flood, but also for wildfires. It's not for flooding reasons. On the next slide. So just some of the preparedness activities that we're doing. I talked earlier about the local emergency management organization and the meetings that they're having. We've been issuing a lot. A lot of this is around communications to the public, so preparing public preparedness information, putting things on the website, having these meetings, meeting with the media. I talk about some of those channels that we're using later. Some of the training that's needed, confirming roles. A big key activity during an emergency might be an evacuation. So we have a registration system that we get updated on, get it ready to go. We train our staff and other staff, sometimes volunteers that might help with that process in case we have to set up an evacuation center here. So you got to think of cots, you got to think of food, all of that. Yeah, and then just there's some other key infrastructure protection that we make sure that we're limiting the risks to for potential damages to roads or town assets. On the next slide, again, as I indicated, everyone has some responsibility for preparedness, so for yourselves or for the private area and public in general. You just want to make sure that you're taking steps to protect your property. We've sent out brochures in the mail. It's available on our website. But just quickly up on the board here, we talk about making sure that you're moving equipment, vehicles, anything that's of value that might be damaged and it's in the lower levels of your property, especially if you're within those flood risk areas that Travis showed earlier. Yeah, installing any barriers that might help protect water flowing into your property. Check your sump pumps. A lot of times flooding will come through your sewer system, and ensuring you have backflow valves can be helpful in some flood scenarios. If you have a sewer tank on your property, it's not a bad idea to try to get it pumped out if risks start to increase, just so it's not overflowing and creating an environmental risk to your property for cleanup later. yeah, just any, special precautions, safeguarding equipment, heating systems around your house. It's the most basic level of protection that you can do. When you are building your properties, if you're building a new property or structures, you want to just come to the town, get a development permit, and we can help make sure it's at proper flood levels or elevations. So next, I'm going to pass it on to Travis, and he's going to give a little information on wildfire.
So this is the wildfire burn map from 2023. It shows the intensity ranges in the fuel from that event. So you can see we're surrounded, and this area up here is showing up there. It is. Okay. So this area up here is from the May wildfire. So you can see that's the one that hit KFN. So in total, this wildfire in 2023 that ended in October was 521,000 hectares. So that's burned around our community, creating sort of a natural fire break for us. Current conditions that I've heard is that they expect us to start with drought conditions, but the meteorologist for ECC thinks there'll be a slower start to the season than in years past. They've started with some really high drought codes. They think this year will be a bit lower than that, but they expect that it'll pick up over the summer. And they do expect to have some overwinter fire holds by the border that was burning last year into the winter. I know that they've completed some scans on them and then plan to start actioning them with crews as soon as crews are on board, which I believe is coming up this week. For ECC's mitigation, I'm just more or less regurgitating some of the stuff that they've told us that they're starting their seasons earlier. They increased their equipment. There is an enhanced notification protocol for communities since 2023. We were one of those that experienced little notice. So there's been a lot of updates to that. There were overwinter thermal scans of previous fires to try and address any holdovers sooner than later. Something that's new, I just returned from a wildfire preparedness conference last week, and a lot of talk was around WUI, which is Wildland Urban Interface. That's training where fire departments train to be able to interact with the interface, which is the trees, where the trees meet the community, more or less. There's a lot of the work that we did with Alberta's WUI program during the 2023 wildfire. So ECC seeing a need for it in the Northwest Territories, which we've also been asking for them to see that need, and it sounds like there's going to be work to establish a program in the territories, which I think is a good thing. And for this year's start, they're starting with training for communities on what they call S115, which is a sprinkler protection program. So they're planning to go throughout the Northwest Territories to small communities and all communities and offer this sort of training so that if it comes to protecting, there'll be some trained resources in communities. So for mitigation for the town of Hay River, we obviously have the 2023 burned area, that 521,000 hectares, plus the 21,000 hectares on the other side by KFN. We have our main fire break that was doubled during the event. We went from 30 meters and doubled it to 60 meters, so it's quite a decent fire break. We have a community fire smart program that we run as well, and we'll be running this year. Wildland Urban Interface program, like I said, ECC is working on that, but that's also something that we've been working on too. We brought training in from Alberta last year for our firefighters to be trained as Wildland Urban Interface crew members. So our department works on that training themselves. We also conduct a wildfire tabletop exercise that's specific for our community and the remaining risks of fuel pockets we have around. We obviously use fire bans when things are extreme. Oh, gotta go back. Oh, here we are. And there we go, sorry. And we also try to manage that with ECC's forecast throughout the year. We also are working on unsightly enforcement, which can cause fire risk to their neighbors. Our fire break maintenance, so something that we were trying to get done. We had basically a large tree area running through the main of our fire break, which was all the trees that were pushed into the middle when they broke the new fire break or added onto it. So that's now been mulched down, so that's not there as a risk anymore. Our community wildfire protection plan, which is a document maintained by ECC, but it's for our community, is going to be updated this year. It hasn't been updated since 2019, so the plan is to come in and update that. The other part that's new for that is a wildland urban interface response plan that they add to that, so that's something we'll have some input on. There's also some fire smarting work that we're doing right now in the Oxbow Trail. That's been an area that we've had some set fires over the years, and there's some heavily dense trees in that area, so that's we have a project currently interacting with part of that, but also some of the interface trees throughout 105th Street. And then construction standards that we have implemented, not implemented.
Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, we are doing an update on our zoning bylaw, zoning and building bylaw. I don't think there's a lot coming out of it for wildfires, but in some cases there might be. How do we increase protection when you build homes in the community?
So our community fire smart program, so it's built on the 7 principles of fire smarting, which is public communication, vegetation management, legislation, development, interagency cooperation, cross-training, and emergency planning. So for public communication last year and this year, we'll continue pushing out fire smarting message throughout the year, just different ways that you can fire smart and manage your properties. And we're also looking at installing a sign downtown to indicate whether or not what the risk level is. So there's not just one out at ECC, there's one downtown that says what is our current risk rating and whether or not there's a fire ban. Just to try and get a little more information out to the public. Vegetation management, we have an advanced home assessment program where we'll support 3 home assessments for anyone from the public that wants a home assessment. They can contact the Town of Hay River main office, and we have a home fire smart specialist that will come and visit and do a review of your property and let you know what are your risks and how you can improve it with fire smart. We also have waste pickup from the Town of Hay River, so in addition to spring cleanup, we also like to try and advertise. That's when we're going to try and take away everyone's brush that they've cleaned up for fire smart, so that'll be removed at no cost during that time. Legislation, there's changes that we're proposing to the unsightly bylaw to hopefully help us with some of the vegetation management issues. Interagency cooperation, so we are working on mutual aid agreements with our neighbors and other communities so we can easily interact with each other and have support from resources more easily. And we're also looking at a mutual aid agreement in the territories as well. So trying to just take down some barriers so that we can help each other respond in an emergency. For cross-training, the Town of Hay River last year trained in ICS, so they got trained in ICS 100 and 200. We're looking into a 300 course potentially in the fall. Our department trained in WUI, Wildland Urban Interface, as I said, and we're looking to coordinate with some other communities this year to get some more members trained. And then we're planning to do some cross-training with ECC. So their crew members, just making sure that we're set up and compatible, and we know how to respond together. And then emergency planning, each year we undergo a review of our emergency plan, and as a result of this event and other events before it, we've really overhauled that document. So this year it was minor changes and mostly just contacts, making sure everyone's current in it, and we'll look to exercise it with the tabletop. So for fire starting, has everyone seen this image here before behind me? The different zones. So those are different home ignition zones. There's actually some newer updated graphics here that show it a little more better. But this zone 1 is really 0 to 1.5 meters. We don't want to have any trees in that area because those could transfer to our house. Intermediate zone is at 1.5 meters, so making sure that our fuels are cleaned up in that area. The extended zone at 10 to 30 meters, we want to make sure that we don't have dense forests in that area, and that they're trimmed and limbed. And then the extended zone, which is the yellow one there, so just making sure that that is thinned out. There's a ton of great resources on Firesmart Canada. You can look it up yourself, and they do a great job explaining all of it. Any reporting of smoke and fires, does anyone know the number for ECC's wildfire number? It's 1877 NWT fire. It's worth throwing in your phone. That way if you're driving past something that doesn't look right, then you can at least make contact. We get a lot of calls for wildfires out on the highway that is kind of outside of our area, but anything within town we'll obviously respond to immediately. So, and our number is 874-2222.
Thanks, Travis. So I'm going to touch on a few points on evacuation preparedness. I mentioned before, it's one of our key response activities if things really go bad. We can't really stop some of these natural disasters as much as we'd like to. So just being prepared to evacuate, whether it's for a portion of the community, often we'll have those cases in a flood where maybe just a region or an area of the community, such as the West Channel, might need to be evacuated. And then there's situations where we've seen full community evacuation. So just some of the preparedness tips for residents and the public. You want to make sure that you have a plan for temporary accommodation arrangements. So where might I go if I live in a high-risk flood zone within the community? Or if I was to leave the community, maybe I have some friends or family in a different community that I want to go to, just to make it easier so you're not part of staying in public evacuation centers or trying to fight for hotels, etc. If you have an RV or a camper, it's a good idea to use that or consider that for temporary accommodation. So making sure it's ready, especially this time of year. It's very early, and things are probably taken out the winterization and such. Making sure you have clothing ready, essentials for your family. Have a household emergency plan. Discuss it with your family members. Ensure you have prescriptions and medications ready, up to date. It can take a long time. In some cases with medical services. And think about your pets. That's been one of the bigger issues we've had to deal with is where my pet's going to go, how am I going to get them ready. Take them with you and have a plan for them. Also, good idea if we do get to situations where it's a higher risk that you have fuel in your vehicle. Keep your gas tanks kind of full during high risk seasons, so that you're not going to be stuck in a very long gas line. On the next slide, of course I mentioned again, it might be a partial evacuation scenario within the community or a mass evacuation. If we had a partial within the community, our designated location is here at the Hay River Community Center. So we have cots and staff prepared to provide basic food services and such, as well as registration and other information. If there was a mass evacuation, our plan sees that we would be hosted in Yellowknife, but that is always subject to change. There's, during evacuation preparedness, we have 3 key messages that we use. We color code them in green, yellow, and red, as presented here and on the next slide. At the very high level is an evacuation notice, and we will issue that when there's just an evolving risk in the area. Sometimes in the past we've used it just when breakup starts occurring, like it is now. But if it got to a point where we thought the risk was higher, a notice would be issued. Just again tells the public that there's some kind of active risk in the area. Just execute your general preparedness plans, and at that time, vulnerable residents can actually register online or through our registration center, just so we know that you might need assistance during an evacuation if there was one. The yellow code is evacuation alert, so the risk is increased. Communications come out through the NWT alert system as well as the town's standard communication systems. So that's the message you might receive on your cell phone or on your satellite TV. At that point is when we tell vulnerable residents, and that's people that might be in, say, long-term care facilities or assisted living, homeless, that we work with the health authorities to help move those residents out of the community because they need extra attention. On the next slide is the red evacuation order. So that's issued through our general communications, but also the NWT alert system that I mentioned. And our emergency responders try to go door to door throughout the community with alarms. So it might be the fire department or the RCMP. Any residents, visitors within the community or the specific area that's been identified for evacuation order, they are to leave immediately when this message comes out and travel to an evacuation destination that's been specified. And just finally here, I mentioned these are the communication channels that the town uses for various levels of emergency messaging. So Town Hero Facebook page, currently we're putting up daily updates on flood breakup conditions. That's also mimicked on our website. We have an emergency measures email system. If you go to our website, you can subscribe to that, and all of this messaging comes to your email system or your email. We also update our registration center phone number, our system, and that's the phone number there. I apologize, it's not the easiest to remember, but it is in all of our communication materials. So you call that and you can get updates on current conditions. And again, like our breakups that's occurring right now is pushed out through it. Excuse me. And then I mentioned the emergency responders in the NWT alert system. And that's it. We're really open to any questions that you might have, current conditions or mitigation or preparedness. So thanks.
I got one question for you. Mitigation, you guys are going in the old town, right? That brush cutting or whatever, right, like the obstacle and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any chance, Paul, you can expand that?
So, yeah,
Like where Robert Dean's property is and all that, because there's lots of deadfall
yeah.
and lots of potential for fires.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that comes with updating the wildfire protection plan is new projects and identifying the current or the existing risks
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And so
And
that's
you guys had
supposed
West
to-
Valley House in there, I think was, I remember a couple of years ago, we were there.
Yeah, both of them.
Property beside me,
Right.
in the channel where he did all that, and over by the gate and the fence and all that.
Campground.
And it looks good.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just that between there and the other side of, like where they started there, they were all that.
Yeah,
Then it would look all right, because there's lots of deadfall in there.
yeah,
It's either that or else open it up to the people couple.
yeah. Yeah, that is somewhere last time they were through, when I was asking them to update the plan last year,
Yeah,
that was an area I said this needs to be included. So plan's gonna be updated this year. I've been told it's happening. That is an area that is likely gonna have a project. Yeah.
because you get a fire there, it wouldn't take very much to get, asphalt.
Yeah. For sure.
Just saying.
Yeah, I wish I had the money right now too.
Oh,
But we should be able to once
Yeah.
we get the project.
yeah.
Yeah, and a few years before that, they did right by the campground there, that corner,
Yeah,
that area.
yeah, that's where they were,
Yeah.
all this week here, they came crushed.
Oh, they
all
did.
that. And then they were going towards the, Oxford.
Yeah, even this project, I think it's not all the way through the Oxbow, and I'd like
No.
to see it work its way all the way through, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
You know, I always have questions.
And if you want the mic, grab it, but I'll try to mimic.
That's okay, I'll be trying to be loud enough. So, regarding to contacting people or communicating with people, a lot of the communication options up on the screen require power and they require internet. And neither of which can necessarily be considered, I think, dependable in this, given our current political season and things like that that are happening. Do we have any other backup way of sending out a general alert that is power independent?
Yeah, I mean, one of our key tools that we do in evacuation order scenario is trying to go door to door as much as we can, right? So the emergency responders, and I think we have during every evacuation, even a partial, where we'll send them out. They might be using alarms, but where we can, sirens might be going on our fire equipment or on the police cruisers. But yeah, we try to go to each zone. We actually even will inventory people who decided to stay as opposed to adhere to the orders. So it's the best, mechanism that we can do if we have the resources to support it at the time. Some of the communication systems, becoming more redundant through, conversations that we've had with Northwest Tel. Of course, Starlink's become a popular tool. We have it now installed at town emergency offices and locations, this one, the town hall, etc. Mobile equipment that we have, even our flood monitoring equipment now is using them. So, bits and pieces. It's tough to keep on top of all organizations, what's health doing in other areas, but I think we're in a better position than we were for that. From the power, we do power. I don't think the power has gone out during our recent emergencies, even during the wildfire. Luckily, Tolston's back online for our main hydro, but we do have the benefit of at least having. We have the standby generation that NTPC is now operating, the diesel generators. So little bits of redundancy, but if it comes to the point of losing power and those communication channels, yeah, it's word of mouth and alarm system, or alarms going door to door.
So when you say alarm system, that is like just what we have on the emergency vehicles?
Sorry, I meant the sirens, yeah, loudspeakers.
So you're not
and
talking
sirens.
about an independent siren like Calicut has?
We are looking at it, or LIMO's been looking at different options, so they have costed out some. It's tough with such a very large community, or geographically spread out. So we've looked at pricing and options that can do the entire West Channel to Paradise Gardens and repeaters, and actually have voice that comes through it versus just an alarm. And what does this alarm mean, right? Where do I go type of thing. Then downscale to just very basic type of alarm. So it's being looked at, but nothing that has progressed yet to putting in place, I'd say.
Do you have any option of using old style, if you will, emergency communication to him?
Ham radio. Not that I'm not familiar with the technology enough, but
I mean,
we
you
have
have that,
sat-
you need communication, that same communication on the other side, who you communicate with.
Quite a few, actually.
mm,
My husband
think
is
it's
a
a
ham
handful of
radio
people.
operator. He does communicate around the world. And they basically get to where they can. That person bounces it back over to another one, who bounces it to someone closer to us in the zone. Within a matter of, I'm gonna guess within a matter of half an hour, an hour, depending on how the conditions are.
But who you communicate with. There's only a handful, I know a couple people that do it here in town, but there's not a whole lot of ham radio people in town.
But you don't communicate within town, you communicate if you need external help.
mm.
Oh,
And you're unable to communicate for that external help.
Yeah, we do have, we have satellite phones and our equipment now with Starlink as well. Even some of it's good to see other technologies like Apple phones now, you can actually text when cell services goes down if you have satellite services. So there's things emerging, but ham radio hasn't been explored, but communication
I
is
guess my
critical.
question is, Elon Musk owns Starlink. We all know where he is right now. Right?
Well,
We all
yeah.
know what he's done to one of his companies. What's going to happen to any of the
Yeah.
rest of them?
But there's other, I think I saw Amazon today started launching their satellites. There'll be other services, Northwest Tel and European services. So it's in its, I wouldn't say infancy. I remember having satellite internet 20 years ago. And, it's getting better and better. Any more questions?
on my third list.
It's a totally random question, but in previous flood threat mapping that has gone out to the community, there's been the highlighted areas around town that are at risk. Why is there a section highlighted in the industrial area on those maps? Like, what is that?
You're testing me, but I'm gonna guess it's related, like we have a main storm system that kind of flows into the industrial area. So on the north and south side, all the water kind of merges there, melts through and comes through our ditch system, as well as in the main town. So if there's a main storm that goes all the way under, kind of by the source, and then besides out to the river. And what we saw in 2022 is the water levels get so high, it actually goes up through the storm system.
Yeah, it's
And
not
then-
from direct water.
That
Yeah.
was just, because I was like, there's got to be some kind of underground piping. Like, it doesn't make
It is.
sense that that's technically the high ground of the community. Like, in the
Yeah.
sense of it is the furthest away from the
Correct.
river on all sides, but okay.
Yeah, it's the underground storm system, and that's why I said even sewer system storms, on some of the mitigation work that we're doing is potentially putting on backflow so that the water cannot backflow up through the storm. So yeah, we're actually just talking today about some of the budgets and money we've been able to secure to try to do that work this year. That airport road that I talked about where we're lifting it up, it will have backflow prevention in it, so the water from the river can't just go through the storm. It's always a tough, and even in the ravine and into the berm in the West Channel, you want to stop water from going over the berms, but you also want to be able to open up the valve so that water can get out. So it's a tough balance with these backflow systems.
Has there been any talk of cutting back the brush that runs behind 553 and in that area? Like, I live on Fur and back onto the green space there, and we took 3 feet of water from that drainage ditch, I guess, that runs back there. But what I've noticed is that that's all poplar and whatever, and it's definitely overgrowing. And I know back in the summer of, I think 2018, I think it was the power guys who came in with that fancy saw system that cuts it all back, but it's definitely grown up since then, right? That when we talk about cutting back for fire smarting, cut it back 10 to 30 meters. well, the back of our property line
Yeah,
is less than that, right? So,
yeah, okay, so kind of got that image. You, Travis, could probably talk about, like we've got the big fire break that we doubled in
Yeah.
size. It's a little ways, but towards like the ballpark and runs behind the hospital all the way. It's been doubled in size, and actually this last week we're cleaning up a bunch of it. But closer to the homes there, yeah, I mean, poplar is generally not a high fuel species, but yeah, I don't know, Travis, do you want to add anything there that's identified for work?
Yeah, and during the event, I can talk to the fact that that worked really well for a wet line that we put back there, because species like that, when you can put water into them, they're a good defense and they don't burn very well. So we fired systems and ran water into those trees twice a day. And
they loved it because all of our yards are now.
Now they've grown.
we needed it for a different reason. Yeah, my yard is too. So, but yeah, I mean, when it comes to updating the CWPP, the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, it's going to take a hard look at all remaining risks to the community and hopefully identify the projects that need to be completed. So if that is one, then that'll be identified.
So switching back to the flood subject, you mentioned that we were going to raise the road on the 553 side from the west channel down to the areas there where it came over. Is there any plan to counter that on the west channel side? Because if you block water from going over there, it's going to want to come over to the west channel side. So those extensions in the berm, are they going to counterbalance that?
Yeah, your point, that's the problem where you create a barrier somewhere and it can increase the risk somewhere else. So we've had like extensive hydrology studies and considerations of it. The raising of the road doesn't go too far. Like I said, it has a big depression just when you go over the railroad tracks, and then it starts to elevate to more flood-resistant levels, kind of by the ballpark. So it's a pretty short little space there that like it can put. It can.
If you build that, that's the flood.
It can
Right
put
now,
a.
that's where it gets away. So if you flood that, it's got to come back on itself, which is the west channel by the airport.
Yeah, it would. I mean, it would. Obviously, there's so many different ice jam scenarios and what could happen, but it would still, the water would sort of kind of go around, you know, into an area that's less developed after by the ballpark. Could put a little pressure on the airport area, but part of that West Channel berm project does have an element of extending towards the end of the airport by the waterways, so adding some protection there.
Okay.
But
Fair enough.
it's it is definitely considered in the design.
Yeah, with ice jamming, you could be at the other end of town, you could be down by the home center. If it jams there and there's enough volume of water, it can flood that area. Like, you can't prevent every area. And that's
Well, I
why we
understand that,
actually
but-
have some people coming to study the river again from the universities, and so when they came in the 80s, they just said, it's unpredictable because of the jamming of the Hay River. It could jam any location, so, you know, we're preventing what we've seen in the past. And like Glenn said, that low dip, I was there when it flooded. When it went over the bank, that's where it went, right in that low area. You know, we've raised the river in 553, or on River Drive, so it would prevented that. The berm will help the West Channel protect from the airport side, because there's always a little road there that gets you into the airport if you have to, but yeah, I mean, we just, like Redwood Brian would tell me, you're only as good as your next weakest link. You fix one area, then there might be another leak
That's
down the
my
road.
point.
Yeah.
But we can't burn the whole road, or the whole river all the way down, I think.
Or burn both sides, more to your point, I think, right? So
Yeah.
you can't, but just such a high density of development in that first part where it flooded, that, you know, a lot of economic value into that area. So just a little protection there without compromising the integrities of the other side, you know, to a significant degree.
And it'll run over top of the Red Channel there, where like on the other side of basically the West Channel there, or the West Channel River. There's an island there. If it gets to a certain point, it'll go right over top of that island. And most times it'll avoid the west channel that way.
Okay, if there's no more questions, well,
One quick one.
yeah.
Are there still sandbags available for people who want them?
The sandbag program is a go. I think they're available through our public works yard on the just over across in the industrial area on Industrial Drive Road. So you can stop in there if anyone's interested. It's kind of left over from prior years. So hopefully the risks are quite a bit lower this year, but still have that program available. Okay, well, we'll wrap it up, but feel free to come speak to any one of us here now or later. Of course, you can always reach out to Town Hall. So thank you very much for coming.
And
staying
the
for more.
Oilers game starts.
Oh, yeah, of course, the Oilers, go Oilers, 8 o'clock.
Everyone runs
Hard
in.
stop,
Yeah,
hard
gotta
stop.
go. Thank you, that was a great presentation.
Thank you.